study session for the Independence City Council for Monday, January 27th, 2020. We have one report tonight and our boards and commission, or one presentation and one report. First up is our rate study update. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Part of our Independence for All strategic plan is to do a assessment of all our utility rates, make sure that they are equitable, both in the sense of reasonable and responsible for our customers, but also generating what's necessary to run our utilities in the standard that we expect. We've been working the last several years on the Independence Electric utility rates. I've had a number of studies and presentations on that. Tonight, staff wants to give you one final presentation on that to make sure we've got everything dressed appropriately with that. Our intention would be to get any remaining feedback that the council has and then get an ordinance docketed before this body for adoption and implement that decrease we've been speaking of. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our Acting Assistant General Manager, Jim Nail, to go through this presentation tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Evening, Mayor, Council.
Evening.
Jim Nail, Acting Assistant General Manager at Power and Light. As the City Manager said, this is an update to let you see where we're at. I know for the last couple of months you've kept getting extensions, and we'll come back to you later. Hopefully this one will be all on the same page and be able to go forward with our rate plan. Where we started out, we had a directive to simplify the rate schedules, to come up with a consolidated rate schedule, and then in addition to that was the directive to have a 6% decrease across the board for all of the ratepayers. The first one, the 6% rate reduction, that's been done. We've adjusted the bills, we've corrected the billing process so that every customer is seeing a 6% break on their electric rates. The second one, simplifying the rate structure, that's been the chore, and that's what's been complicated, trying to work through that. Our goal has been to reorganize the over 20 different rate schedules into what's effectively 5 classes with 9 rates within those 5 classes. Simplify how the bills are calculated, and then one of the goals was to reset our fuel cost adjustment to 0 and then revisit that annually instead of having this variation from month to month. The approach that we've used is that all customers currently in the system see that 6% cut, the 6% reduction on their bill compared to the published rates. If our new rate structure gets approved, once it's finished, all of those customers will still see their 6% reduction. What we're proposing to you tonight is that any new customer would go on to the simplified rate structure, which would be the true 9 rates out of those 5 rate classes. And I'll explain that in just a second. Again, anyone who's already a customer keeps their 6% discount. Any new customers would go to the simplified rate structure. The reason for that, with the 6% savings on all customers and then trying to squeeze those into a consolidated rate class. Let's say, for example, residential. You've got your base rate, you've got a lower rate for somebody with hot water heater, you got another lower rate for somebody with electric heat, you got another lower rate for someone with all electric, and even within there's some modifications and some adjustments to those bills. So if we want to take all of those customers and put them into one consolidated rate, the guy with the lowest, he drives the train. Everyone else has to come down to that. In order for him to keep his 6% savings, everybody else has to come down to that rate. The result of that would be a loss of revenue projected anywhere from $700,000 to over $2 million in additional lost revenue, and Power and Light can't absorb that. The solution to that, or what they've been working on for the last several months, is behind the scenes, try to go in and claw that back by doing calculations and manipulations to the bill after the fact. The result is we say we have a simplified rate structure, But in effect, what we really have is a cover page that says we have 5 rates, and behind the scenes, we've recreated the same complicated structure we already have in order to bring those, in some cases, 15 to 20% discount back down to the 6 that they were guaranteed. So in effect, if we keep going down the track that we've been going, we actually don't simplify at all. It looks like we've simplified, but within the billing system, we would have thousands of calculations in order to bring those bills back to the range of that 6% savings. What we're proposing today is, let's create the simplified structure that we want, the goal that we want to get to, but let's grandfather our existing customers. Their 6% savings is already built into the billing system. We don't have to redesign, we don't have to recode any of that. They would keep their 6% savings, but we would build the simplified rate structure for everyone going forward. That will allow us to get to that point where we have the rates in a more simple, straightforward manner that we'd like. The rates that Burns and McDonnell recommended, those were originally based on a concept of going to an average 6%, so that the folks that have been paying less pay a little more, the folks who were paying the most pay a little less, and then it all averages out. Since we're not going that direction, we're gonna guarantee the 6%. The easiest way to get there is to grandfather those customers and let them keep their 6%.
Jim, let me ask a question. So on this slide, which is a couple back, it says, keep your 6% rate reduction today and transition to new rates over time. But in that context, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is transition to a new rate class, not a new rate cost. Is that right? Or, I mean, it could be different. I mean, it could be, combined, but what they're paying wouldn't change. They would just be categorized into a different class.
Correct. Our current customers
Right.
would pay the same thing they're paying
Okay.
now. We checked with customer service. 2019 saw over 16,000 new accounts out of our, 57,000 customer accounts, 16,000 new ones. In 2020, under this plan, those 16,000 accounts would all go into the new rate structure. Now, is there gonna be someone who buys the house of their dreams and is gonna live in it for the next 50 years? Very possibly. But over a several year period, a large percentage of our customer base will eventually migrate into that new rate structure.
So when they close an account and open a new one because they have a new location, that's when this transition would happen.
Correct.
Okay.
New accounts.
But I just want to be clear, and maybe I'm having a difficult time articulating this, that what their rate they're paying would not change, but the title of their right may change.
That's a fair assessment.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Excuse me.
The rates are not based on you. The rates
Right.
are based on your residence or your business. The physical attributes of that location is what determines the class of
Right.
bill that you're in. So
Okay.
if you move, you're in a new situation.
Okay, so the different variations of the structure is so complicated that bringing that down would be impossible.
Not impossible, just it would
Okay, so-
require a lot of programming.
Okay, so would the people coming in have that advantage? Okay, you're saying that there's different levels, heater, so on and so forth. Coming in, you have put where you want it, or put it how you want it, and they would still have that advantage.
We're proposing within residential 2 rates. One for your just general residential and one for residential with electric heat. Because the electric heat, that's an industry norm.
No, I got-
And it's, so
Yeah,
that 2 rates instead
Right,
of 6.
and over the years, so many things had been added. Now, at a later date, we see that they weren't, or not, at this point, efficient and/or needed.
Correct.
Right. Okay. The other thing, and I was gonna let you go through, but if we're gonna stop you during these things, at zero rate, I would rather see a 6-month so that it doesn't catch them at the end. You know, I don't want them to have a slam on their bill that, thank you.
Right, understood.
We can ask some more questions while we get your presentation back.
Well, I know, the next page in your handout has the breakdown of the existing classes and what the new structure would look like. It's got the major classes over on the right, so you got residential, commercial, industrial. Over in the middle section is.
Jim, are you supposed to have that up?
Yeah. She's-
They're working on
Meg's
it. I think.
Oh, okay.
In the interest of time, I know what the slides look like, so I figured I'd.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm with where you're supposed to be, because I'm looking over here and, all right.
I believe the next page was the blue one that has all the rate classes on it.
Now, we only get it in one color, not blue.
Great. So you see the proposed rate structure would have fewer classes. The 9 rates that are listed there in the center, those are, you'd see as industry norms across the country. Most utilities would have those type of breakdowns.
The very last one, Jim, I can't read it, I'm sorry. Municipal, what is that?
It
That's
says,
your lighting.
City streetlights,
Oh, cities, oh, thank you.
Right.
traffic signals and buildings.
So it's municipal and private lighting.
Oh, wow, there's something written there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do need that thing. And the one before that,
Industrial.
that's an I.
You got residential, on the right-hand side, you got residential,
Special contract
commercial,
Interrupted at the bottom,
special contract, interruptible service,
and below that,
private lighting,
okay,
and then municipal.
okay.
And then your next 2 slides are just some examples of how the customer bills are calculated. And these are example numbers. These are not final numbers. Like I said, the Burns and McDonnell recommendation was based on all customers going to the consolidated rates. We still need to run some estimates using a hybrid of consolidated plus grandfathered. But these numbers, at least it gives you an idea of how the bills would be calculated.
Jim, if I may.
Sure.
So the fuel cost adjustment, that's going to be the X factor that we don't know necessarily we don't know that number on a continual basis, because that
Correct.
adjusts ups and downs and all of that. So how big of a swing can that possibly be on somebody's bill?
I'm gonna defer to our rates manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Robert Stowell, the Planning Rate Supervisor and Acting Utility Finance Manager. Yes, the PCA or the FCA currently changes on a monthly basis, and it can vary. Right now, it varies anywhere from about 1.5 cent to 2.5 cents or whatever additional cost. However, when we reset it, we're going to reset it to 0, and our plan is to have it as a forward-looking, so it'll be that way for a year unless we need to adjust it. And we'll be basing it more off of what our budget expenses are going to be. And then we'll do a true-up once a year to see if anything. So for the first year, it'll be at 0.
So the second year, we can have a possibly higher rate, utility rate?
Or
if
lower.
you're- Or lower?
Yes.
Lower.
It depends on how much we build, we'll build the expense into the base rates of some, a certain amount of cost for fuel and purchase power. If we come in less than that and we don't, then the rate could be a credit, as it was in the past. It used to be a credit, now it's not a credit.
So will that be set on our budget calendar or our fiscal calendar? Or
It
our,
would be planned to be on more of the fiscal basis, but the first year will be set at 0. Because we're rebaselining it, including those expenses into our current base, into the revised base rates.
So year 3, when we have another adjustment, I mean, is it potential to have such a big swing that there's an extra $50 to $70 on a utility bill?
Depending on how much energy you use, it's potential for like a large commercial customer to see something like that. For a residential, I would say no. And these are, we'll have the calculations set forward. Currently, I do those calculations on a monthly basis, but we'll keep track of where we are, and we'll calculate these on a forward-looking basis, and we'll be able to see where we stand. And if there are changes to, our fuel expenses or our purchase power costs, they'll be reflected. But we should have, currently we have about half of our fuel expenses being recovered by base rates. The other half are being recovered through the fuel cost adjustment. Going forward, all of our expenses should be in the base rates, and then we'll see if we have to add or subtract.
My concern is not so much with the commercial, although that is, but it's the residentials who definitely take a hit out of the pocketbook and that. So as the council member was talking about revisiting this every 6 months, how does that fit into the playbook if we were to proceed with that?
The plan would be to set it up for a year, but we could set it up to review it every 6 months and make adjustments as needed.
Be the same thing that we would do annually, but 6 months.
Right. I mean, we could write, if that's what the desire is to set it as a 6 months, we could do it as a 6 month instead of a year. I would just like to move away from getting to a monthly basis, because we have a lot of customers, commercial business and other stuff, that will ask, so what's the FCA going to be next year, so they can plan their budget.
Sure.
By doing this as a forward-looking, we should be able to say, this is what we expect our fuel costs are, and then we'll do a true-up, either a 6 month or an annual basis, depending on, the desire you guys have.
Sure. I know you know the history of our utility billing rollout, and in getting trued up has been a bad word that we would like to try to avoid for sure. So, but I understand what we're trying to do here to get that fuel cost adjustment.
So by not resetting it to 0 every year and again, please correct me if I'm not remembering this quite correctly. What we had been doing is just letting that kind of, I'm going to say, accumulate. So when you don't reset it to 0, it may be at, I don't know, pick a number 1, 2, and then if it goes up or down, it's going up or down from that point instead of from 0.
Correct.
Okay. So if it went up, then when it went down, it didn't go down to where it really should have been. It didn't drop below, and never had the opportunity to drop to 0.
Right. The last time we actually reset our FCA costs would have been in 2007, I believe.
Right.
So we have not changed any, but yet our fuel mix, our energy mix has changed dramatically since then. So that's why, it's gone up, it hasn't been. I think 2007 was the last time we actually had a credit, a small credit and all that stuff. So it's been gradually increasing as our things have changed, but over the past year or two, it's been fairly stable, I would say. I mean, it varies. The problem we do by doing it on a monthly basis is when we calculate it, we base it upon the sales that we had the previous month. So when our sales vary on a wide range of monthly, if we have a huge range of kilowatts that are sold during a month, that's going to help lower the cost because you spread your cost out over more kilowatt energy. By doing it on a monthly, on an annual basis with a 6 month look at, you're spreading that cost so that we don't have these large swings by month. It should be more stable throughout the whole year.
So FCA is fuel cost analysis. How come we're putting in purchase power on that? Why aren't we, when we start at 0, that's what it should be. And actually fuel costs have come down, so you just said it went up.
Well, it includes more than just fuel. It includes more
Right,
than
that's why
natural
we're going to
gas and all
0, is to clear the books so we don't have all the garbage in on the fuel. Is that a correct statement?
I don't know if I would say it that way, but I would say we're restructuring it to take into consideration what our fuel as well as purchase power costs are. Because when this was done in 2007, we didn't have as many purchase power agreements and all that stuff. We have a lot more purchase power agreements and other, as well as buying power from the energy market now. So our structure has changed a little bit. So that's why I was proposing to do it as a power cost adjustment, which would include to true up the name to more reflect what it is. It's our purchase power for energy as well as the fuel that we run for, to produce our energy.
Well, the thing when you're doing that though, because that FCA, the fuel, gas is going down, so we would be at a negative. Now you're gonna throw in purchase power, and I'm kinda lost how you can actually zero that out without somebody eating that or hitting somebody harder later on down the road.
Well, what we do is we take, look at what our fuel costs have been over the past couple of years and base that into our base rates. So anytime we set our base rates based upon that fuel level, our fuel and purchase power costs. So if our costs come in less, for example, the integrated market is getting cheaper and cheaper at times, then that will then provide for the next time around, we'll have a credit on the bill
Right.
for the next month.
I just like that FCA, what it stands for, it really doesn't. So I think we need to modify that and change the title of that thing. I mean, it's not a fuel cost adjuster. You're
No,
putting
I
all
would
kinds
agree.
of-
That's what, that's the name that's been around for a bit, I think. Actually.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I'm just,
But to me, it should be called more of a PCA, purchase cost, purchase.
right, because you're saying one thing and we're throwing something else on there, because that thing shouldn't move hardly at all, normally, without the market prices.
It will vary based upon what units run and all that stuff.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
In case I didn't make myself clear on what my thing was, or what I was suggesting is, I don't want to look at it in 6 months. I want an adjustment if it's needed. I don't want people slammed with something. Now, I know from what we've talked about and what we've seen, that the range of this has traditionally not hurt that many people at any one time in any one place. And we don't want to eliminate that there would not have the capability of doing that, but it doesn't historically give the impression that that would happen. This change of rates has allowed us what we've been wanting to do for several years, to adjust this to be a more workable, and I applaud you for putting it in the way you have and doing it. But in order to avoid, I just don't want to look at it. I want to be able to make an adjustment to it if, in fact, the unusual happens.
Correct.
So we can disperse it over the next 6 months or make some kind of application to do it that way.
Right. In our current FCA or PCA that we have the ability to make the director has the ability to make changes to the cost to take into consideration if costs have dramatically changed or increased or decreased to help spread it out.
Right, I understand how
and we would continue wanting to have
accountability
that in there.
be on the records, that you'd want the year,
Yes.
then you'd want to see the year, and then you'd want to apply the year. And given the historic fact, it doesn't run that much of a risk if everything stays as before. But I would really like to have that 6 months to look at.
Okay, I would, our plan to, when we draft that, is to have the ability for the director of Power and Light or the general manager at Power and Light to have the ability to make adjustments as necessary to
Well,
avoid the strike.
Right, they do have that power.
Right, and we
Right.
continue to
That is-
have that.
Right, and it's the same with the Burns and Mac. It's not the Bible. We adjust to what the recommendations and how it is, and I appreciate that coming forward too. Thank you.
I do have a question. Robert, make it really simple for me, okay?
I'll try.
All right. Let's say it's July, and it's at a zero fuel cost adjustment, and we realize, well, we have to switch it now. We have to make a change. And so you change it, give me a number that you would change it to, for example.
For example, that maybe we under-recovered fuel expenses by $1 million.
Okay.
Fuel and purchase power. You would spread that $1 million, you know, looking at what our budget, assume the budget's going to remain the same, there's no change to that. You would spread that $1 million across all of the projected energy you will be selling.
Okay?
So if it's $1 million and we have I think we, like, for example, I think last month or last year, we sold about a million megawatt hours.
Okay.
So it'd be $1 million divided by the million megawatt hours. So that would equate to about a 0.001% of our cent change in there.
And so
For
what do
every
I
kilowatt.
do with that? Do I multiply my summer energy charge by that fuel cost adjustment?
You'll multiply your usage used during that month times whatever that cost is. So that would be I apologize if I'm doing the wrong
No,
numbers,
and
but
I don't- you don't need to
0.001,
get that.
like a
but-
1/10 of a cent.
But
So
that's how it affects my summer energy charge.
it'll affect every energy charge.
Seasonal charge.
It'll
Okay.
be, if it starts in July and we're using that for the next year, then it'll be that extra, 1/10 of a cent added to your energy rate.
So, in
So you'll see
effect,
a-
I'll be paying more money,
Mm-hmm.
even though the rate didn't change.
The rate didn't change, but because of the fuel, the purchase power costs, we were, we didn't, for some reason, we didn't recover enough, so we need to get that. Or,
I
on the
understand.
other side, it could be a credit.
How do I, sitting out in TV land, know when that happens? Do we have a plan?
The plan would be that we would be putting together, the budget's done, our goal would be to do it based upon our projected budget expenses.
Okay,
So our budget expenses, we have to have those finalized by, I think, April or May. So the idea would be sometime around then, we would be, saying if we need an adjustment or not.
okay.
So,
Assume
and
the
that would
answer is
apply,
no.
that would apply to starting in, for example, in July.
Okay. And here we are, we're the 6th month that Councilmember Van Camp was talking about, and we're a little worried, but we're not going to change it, right?
We have if we need to, we'll do it, but it would be
How
something.
will I know? How
would
will I
say-
know when I'm sitting out there that my fuel cost adjustment changed?
We haven't gone through the specifics. My suggestion would be that we would put a notification on a bill or whatever saying that this change will start in effect a month or two out or something like that, to give people, when they see it on their bill, they'll say the fuel cost adjustment is currently 0. Starting at this time, it will be a negative 0.001.
So you're doing this monthly now.
We do it monthly, yes.
How do you know?
We don't.
How do we know what it's
How
going
do
to be?
we know you're doing this monthly?
I have to prepare a memo that I send to.
Yeah, I know, but what out in TV land, how do they know?
We publish the FCA rate out on the website, generally by the first of the month.
Then you could do the same thing,
Yes.
right?
And Robert, is this something the PUAB perhaps would have a voice in, or is this something the PUAB would not? Like, would you present something saying we're thinking of changing the fuel adjustment cost, or is this something that is not something for that committee? It would be more an internal
I think it's-
staffing. I just don't know.
Typically, it's been an internal.
Don't the numbers speak
Decision.
for themselves?
Operational thing? I
It's
mean,
an
not a
operational thing.
policy thing?
I mean,
It'll be spelled out. We can spell it out. The plan would be spelled out in the rate schedule.
Okay.
So, we have the calculation, how we do it every month. And when I say that we'll look forward to projecting it off and doing it as an annual true-up or adjustment as necessary, we'll still be tracking this on a monthly basis, because I know Jim will be saying, where do we stand? Are we looking good or are we looking bad? So that we know, hey, things are, do we need to be thinking about making changes?
Okay, thank you.
So I'll be tracking this on a monthly basis, even though I won't have to make the change to the customer's bill on a monthly basis.
My problem with this is going to turn around looking like the sewer bill, where you're doing this annually, and I'm going to pay for the next year. You catch it on a bad month, on a high gas charge, and I'm going to pay for it for the next year, just like this sewer bill. That is not correct. And that's the way I feel like what the road we're going down here is we're going to annualize this thing, and whatever we come up with July to July, then for the next July to July, I'm going to pay whatever that number is. If it's gas is high and they don't frack or freak or whatever they do, and my gas is higher, I'm gonna pay for that for the next year. I don't understand how you're gonna adjust that so that these citizens are not gonna be paying extra for a whole year, and then you go, well, hey, we got a little project out here we wanna do.
Well, in
mean-
theory, if they're paying more for the next year, it's because they underpaid the current year. And we'll continue to review it, and if the direction of the council is that we do it every 6 months, we can do it every 6 months. None of that is set in stone.
Yeah, I just have a real problem with that. For instance, I'm gonna flip back to the sewer bill because it eats me alive. I had my family up here from Texas. They was here for the month of December. Guess what month they do this in? December, January, February. I got a sister-in-law that's burned out of a house. She lives at my house now too, doing laundry. So now, for them 2 months, I usually average 2 cubic units. Now I'm up to 4. Guess what? I got to pay for the next year 4. I don't want that happening to this light bill. That's definitely a no.
The adjustment cycle isn't based on the center of what you were saying before on each month, what it's put in. This is a opportunity to put it to 0. Is that what I'm getting? And then adjust, and if any circumstances that should arise to that, you can evaluate and do something about, right? I mean, this is why we wanted to go back to 0, because of the horrendous bookkeeping, as well as not getting everybody into the same categories. I mean, if we're going to reduce and simplify, this is almost a must-have.
Correct. And,
Right.
I mean, understand, fuel oil and gas prices change daily. We do our best guess to project what our fuel costs are gonna be.
Right, and historically, it hasn't been in a range that would be catastrophic. I mean,
Correct.
we're okay, but I understand the concerns, but this is also so that we can get to the simplification. We've been working for the 0, the both of us, for a long time to get that down to. I wouldn't want that either, what the councilman's suggesting. But I think there are the safeguards as well as this historical data that justifies this move.
Yes.
Just to touch on your concern that the way sewer does, they said it based upon your winter average or the water winter average and all this stuff. We won't set people's rate based upon whatever they use during a single thing. We're looking at the fuel costs as well as usage across everybody. So just because for, your winter time, you're using a lot more electricity, doesn't mean you're gonna pay that same amount. You're not paying
No,
that same amount every month.
I understand
It's gonna be
that, but
based upon the
once you
usage
set that
use.
number, and the next year fuel goes down, you're still charging me that number if you're only reviewing it annually. And then the end of the year, July, you said, oh, well, we overcharged you guys, what, 100, or 1 million divided by 57,000, divided by how many hours you use, or whatever, however you want to figure it. I mean, I know how to figure it, but just to make it simple. So then, all of a sudden, we got another project. What about these people that need to get that money back? And that's the problem we've been running into all along, is being overcharged. And when we get down to this fuel thing, we're going to 0 to clean it up. And so you had to put that somewhere, everything that wasn't fuel, somewhere in that kilowatt hour.
Really, I think for the most part, what we'll do is we'll have our budget, so, which includes purchase power and all that stuff, will be in our base rates. So this will be the additional cost or credit over that cost that
So
we project.
So in order to get to 0, you roll all this into our base rate, is that what you're
Basically,
telling me?
yes, the fuel costs will be rolled into the base rates.
Okay.
And so everybody's base rates are based upon the same stuff. Going forward, the difference, so if we say it's, $50 million in fuel costs that are in base rates. If we come in at 49, then the next year, there'll be a $1 million credit spread out among all of our customers and all this stuff.
And that's what I don't like.
So, Mr. State Manager, is this not something, that can be addressed by just accounting? I mean, that we don't artificially feel like we just made a bunch of money, and then next year we realize, oh, whoops, we were supposed to give that back. I mean, I think that's what I'm hearing the concern is that, I mean, what I think is the good thing is resetting this to zero so it doesn't just creep up and up and up and up and up. And I mean, it might fluctuate a little bit, but still, you know, the base rate is artificially high on the fuel cost adjustment. So that's good, is resetting it every year. But to what the councilman's saying, and I mean, we can do this as often as we want. If we want to do it quarterly, we can. I mean, that's up to this council to decide.
Yes.
To me, this can be solved by clear accounting, by saying, you know, this money is designated for this purpose, and it can't be, you know, just put into the general pot to be used someplace else, and then later on we find we overcharge people. Now we need to rebate them that money because of the cycle, and the money got spent.
I know
Right.
it's pretty tough to reduce something around here. I could increase it 8%, nobody says nothing. Reduce 6%, you thought I killed everybody.
So, like, I mean, this is something that we'll, you know, talk about, is how frequently we want to do this, and how we're going to account for that, and how that's going to be reflected in the, you know, quarterly updates, financial updates that we get.
Right, and I will, connecting this with another imperative issue that we're working on with Power and Light, though the management consulting firm will cover a lot of important roles, a big part of that will be their assistance with improving accounting and financial transparency and reporting, et cetera. So I think having them on board to help establish these kind of processes you're talking about. So we track it regularly, we monitor it regularly, we don't under or overcharge, and we are transparent and equitable with our customers where we need to be budget-wise.
Okay,
Madam Mayor,
yes.
I would love to muddy the waters some more here, just for, why not? So, the fuel cost adjustment should really be the purchase power purchase power adjustment, I mean, really.
Correct.
That's what we're doing, because we only
It's a
produce, 3% of our power anyway. So with our power agreements and purchase power agreements from Dogwood, Onetta, and whoever in the future we might do, we really don't have much control, do we?
Correct, and in our billing that we get from them, they pass on to us these same cost adjustments. So it's in the bills that we receive from our purchase power agreements.
So if we were to walk that backwards, how do we negotiate with them on that purchase power that they're, you know, giving us the right bill? From the actual producer, Dogwood, to us, how do we know that they're charging us the correct amount of money, power that we're gonna have to pass on to our residents? How is that being double checked or rechecked that we're doing that?
I'll step
Go
in
ahead,
on that. What we get from our purchase power agreements, we get a budget from them. So that's how we build our budget, to say this is what the expenses are gonna be, and they allocate what their projected expenses are. On a monthly basis, we get what their expenses were and going forward. So we pay their bills on a monthly basis. So we get that information. That's why I say this will be tracked on a monthly basis to see where we stand based upon projections and all that.
Sounds like there's just a lot out of our control here. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's just a lot of fluctuation that we don't have control of.
I would
Would
say
that be a fair
We're
assessment?
at the mercy of the market. Yeah.
we're at the mercy of the market of SPP, but for example, with Dogwood, we are a owner there, so we have people that are on the, you know, the board that approves the budget and reviews expenses and all that type of stuff. So we do have some say in some of that stuff. At IATAN, we have representation through MPUA for that type of stuff. So we are involved. That's why we're able to get a copy of their budgets. We get a copy of their expenses. We get their information, their audited information, to make sure that we are getting correct information.
I just want to think that there's nefarious stuff going on, but in reality, we just don't have a lot of control since we only produce 3% of our power, so. Fair enough, thank you.
The rest of the presentation, there were a couple of examples there, just to show you how this new bill, or the billing would be simplified. Have a customer charge, then your energy charge, the FCA, which in this example shows as 0, and then split out the payment in lieu of taxes so that the customer sees what part of their bill is due to rates and which part is due to the other items, and then they get their total. There's 2 examples, both of them step through that. Commercial customers, again, we've given every customer across the system the 6% rate reduction, and that will still remain true as well. The new rates going forward would be consolidated into the classes that were presented, and the bill calculation would be the same as what it is for the residentials with the FCA, the pilot charge.
Did you ever change industrial, who them people are? Is it based on usage still, or how are we defining industrial now?
At this time, we're still defining our industrial customers as customers that are receiving at primary voltage or higher.
So the church up in here is
The
still
church up here
industrial?
is still listed as industrial. We need to work with our billing system to identify which one would be truly and add that information that's currently not into our billing system.
Yeah.
But that's something that we do need to add and move forward so that we can refine that.
Right, and when we were talking about the simplification, I thought that the council at that time made that very clear that needed to be separated, and it's still put in there, is what I'm getting at. That they're still considered industrial. They're not industrial just because of usage. I know that was put in way before you, me. We probably weren't even born, but
It was put in because that was the easiest way for us to report our information. Now that we have the new billing system, we should have a better way. We don't have a way yet. We don't have fields in there to define are they industrial and all that stuff.
Right.
That's something that, yes, we need to implement.
right,
with
and
the billing system.
I'm not saying that, I'm not worried about the price. I just think it needs to be a line item there so people can see the difference there. And we're giving someone like that, because of large usage, then that should be designated on there, not be called industrial, because that's not telling the truth at all.
Okay.
The final slide, and again, these are just example numbers because we still need to go in and refine what was given, the report that was given to us by Burns & McDonnell, and add in the effect of grandfathering the existing customers. But this gives you an example of approximately where the rates would be. And again, this includes, or it still maintains that 6% reduction in power and light rates compared to what it was previously.
Fantastic.
And subject to any of your other questions, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Grandfathering covered a lot. That wasn't in the Burns, was it?
No, that was not, wasn't in the proposal from Burns McDonnell.
This, the implications it has on the future and covering now what we want to do. Great job. Thank you.
I do have one go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So, all right, I'm still fixated on the FCA here. So Dogwood, we're a partial owner of that, and I can't remember off the percentage off the top of my head.
12%.
12%. All right, so we're a 12% owner. So we're selling us power. Do we get a reduced rate to that do we get a reduced rate of power produced from Dogwood to help lower that FCA cost to us, since we're part owner? I mean, we're charging ourselves, in essence. If at a small percentage, I get it, but we're charging ourselves here.
Our ownership of Dogwood entitles us to that 12% of what they're producing, and the rate of that power is based on the budget, operating expenses, maintenance, capital projects. We incur a share of all of that. So all of that goes into the rate that we pay to Dogwood for that energy.
It might help if you would
Change.
give a little overview of how we work with SPP through this, how it's all put in there to make what we get. Our energy comes from SPP. I mean, and so it doesn't come from Dogwood per se. It's just the advantage of where the,
You're correct. All the energy that we use, we purchase from Southwest Power Pool. That is correct. All the energy producers within Southwest Power Pool are scheduled by SPP based on who is the most efficient at the time. And they'll do day-ahead scheduling, others, but they will project and they will plan the most cost-efficient resources that they can put on the system. We are then charged at that rate for the energy that we purchase, that we use. Where Dogwood, Iatan, Nebraska City, all of those come in are, you might consider that an offset. We get paid back by Southwest Power Pool for all the energy we contribute
to the
to the pool. So all of our energy is, we pay for the rate that SPP sets for the day. We get credits back from SPP for everything we contribute. And those are all based on the individual power purchase agreements, ownership agreements, et cetera.
with different rates for different
Different rates for
capacity
different sources.
and energy and so forth.
Correct.
Right. I understand that. I was just wondering how we could reduce that FCA down to a certain amount, since we were part owner, since technically we're owner of one full one and 12% of another. So the next question is, so what's keeping us from actually changing this from the FCA to a purchase power agreement on the billing to be more true and more accurate to where we're at currently?
I'm going to address your first question about how does that FCA. One of the things not only includes what our expenses are, but we also credit ourselves the revenue for the power that we sell.
Okay.
So when Dogwood sells extra energy or whatever, we take that as a deduction, the cost associated with that, and say that was bought by the pool and all that stuff. So it helps to reduce the FCA and that stuff.
Thank you for explaining that to me.
As for the FCA, I think the actual rate schedule is the purchase power or purchase cost rate schedule or whatever. We have just colloquially referred to it as an FCA.
Sure.
It's, I don't want to say it's a cosmetic change, but I mean, I think we need to change the naming to show that it's a different structure now.
Okay,
To a
I'm gonna
PCA.
just, because we've been, down this road so many times, and we like to look at ourselves in comparison to other people. I mean, that can be very instructive to say, how are we doing compared to Evergy, compared to BPU, compared to Columbia, whatever. If we change our terminology, how much does that, how much does that complicate? I mean, it's not, we could, do that tomorrow. I mean, just change what it's called. But then when we're looking at other utilities, are we gonna be some outlier that we call it something else, or does it not matter? It doesn't matter, okay.
No, it
good.
doesn't matter because
there's
each
a lot
company.
there's a lot of wanting to compare apples and apples going
Right.
on, and sometimes that's hard. I mean, it's hard in a lot of cases, and I don't wanna make it more complicated.
It won't make it more complicated. Every utility has, or I shouldn't say every, most utilities have some type of a mechanism to help recover extra fuel costs.
Well,
So
I
it's referred to
understand
as a
that, but if
PCA
we
or
call
other.
it something different than everybody else, and
It'll, actually, if we call it a PCA, that's probably a more common term
Very
across
good.
the
Let's
nation.
do it.
So moved.
I think
Second.
yeah, okay.
I of course have another question, Jim. Will each rate class have a different customer charge? And if the answer is yes, what are the charges based on? I noticed that residential is $9.17. I don't know where that number came from, and I don't know if my commercial building would have that same customer charge somehow. I doubt it.
Each rate class would have, we've tried to keep all the residential the same, the charge amount. And that's why it's come out to like the $9.17. Burns and McDonald, when they did it, they proposed $10. It was a starting point. The basis for the customer charge is to recover some of the fixed costs that we incur every month to read meters, to bill the meters out, to process you know, all that to have the distribution lines and all that stuff. I think when Burns and McDonald and Sawville, it was estimated to be for residential about $25. So we're just trying to recover some of our fixed costs to the customer charge, similar to the natural gas does that to us, you know, at our locations and all that.
Right.
They have a customer charge, a meter charge.
But right
So-
now, my bill doesn't show me
We don't
what my
have one now.
customer charge.
We do
Okay.
not have a customer charge now. We have a
Okay.
minimum bill, but we do not have a customer charge. So this
Okay.
is a new feature that we're gonna have to make us more in sync with most of the utilities around us.
Well, so what's the minimum bill now?
Minimum bill is $4.14 for two of the residential rate classes and $12.09 for three of the others.
Okay.
So it
So-
doesn't change how much people are paying, it just changes how they see it on their bill.
Well, it changes what my bill is.
It would, for the existing customers, it wouldn't necessarily change, but for the new customers, it would change how you pay your bill.
Yeah.
Which is one of the challenges we've had when trying to consolidate, to make sure that the customers with the lower usage don't, you know, still can get their, you know, get as much of the 6% as they can and all that stuff. That's some of the challenges we've been fighting to get that to meet the mandate that everybody still gets at least their 6%.
So if I stay in my house, am I still paying my $4.14 customer charge, or am I going to be paying a $9.17 customer charge?
With our minimum bill, if you stay in your house, you'll still have the minimum bill of $4.14. You pay that, it's your energy usage. Once your energy usage exceeds that, which is about 21 kilowatts during a month, at that point in time, you exceeded the $4.14. So we do not have a fixed fee or anything at this time. We just have
Okay.
the minimum bill.
Okay.
And as for commercials, yes, they will have a different rate. I think the rate was looking around the $40 range for commercials and stuff. Again, it's not a large number. It's a starting point to try to get us to where we can start recovering, you know, some of our fixed expenses up front. And that's what's led to the confusion in our rates, that we have these high blocks up front for short numbers, is because we're trying to recover some of these fixed expenses. By having the customer charge, we get the fixed expenses, so we don't have to have as many tier blocks for the energy rates.
And our new bill will have the pilots broken out.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Just swinging the numbers. Hey, have you ever thought about maybe for that service charge, 100 kilowatt hours or something?
You mean that you get so many
Instead of
kilo?
21, up it to 100?
Yes, we've looked at doing something like that.
Kind of help out some people out there that's in need?
The first, you know, you pay a customer charge and you get the, similar like water, you get the first two, whatever, for the first 100 or something, you would get the first 100 for
Is that in your plan yet, or?
We need to refine exactly how we want to do it in the direction, but yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question. This chart, Jim, would you mind going back to that, because I think we lost our connection when we were looking at
Right.
that, and we were talking about it, and I don't think people could see it. So, not that, yeah, so there you go, that's what you missed. A primary reason to consolidate our rates was for the purposes of economic development and business attraction, that people would, you know, independently go online or look at our rates, and it was so complicated that they, you know, found it difficult to know where to begin if they wanted to, you know, start a negotiation about locating in this city as a industrial or commercial customer. So what I'm curious about, and I want to say, you know, we've been working through this for some time. I occasionally go to PUAB meetings and hear Robert talk there. He comes to the council utilities meetings, and I cannot imagine the amount, I mean, it just boggles my mind, these calculations that you've been trying to do to get to this 6%, without giving somebody a radical, you know, 20% discount. So I appreciate where we are, or else we could be messing with this for another year before we really had something that we could put on the bill out to people. But I want to know, since we aren't really necessarily reducing our categories or changing them, because there's several subcategories under which of these, how is this going to look to people when they go out and look at it? I think that that's what we were driving at as a goal, is that when people see it, you know, it can get complicated when you get down into the detail, but initially they'll at least know how to navigate the rate. So how will that look when moving forward, when we go from the 20 to the 9 to the 4? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
I mean,
it's,
yeah.
I will say that our rate schedules as presented now have been there for many years.
Right.
And we need to restructure how our rate schedules look so that they're more readable, more understandable.
Okay.
And that's one of my goals, is doing that, so it doesn't seem confusing. Well, if you do this, or accept this, and we
Right.
want to try to simplify it as best as possible. What we'll do is we'll have the residential categories, and you'll have different, you know, numbers underneath it, but we want to try to simplify it to make it more readable and legible to do that. You know, we've been looking at other utility companies to see how they do it, and they'll have a residential class like we're going to have, but they'll have different rate structures underneath that. But again, our goal is to make it as readable
Okay.
and change our formatting around, because when I first started here 12 years ago, it took me a little while to understand, how do you calculate
Right.
a residential bill, because our rate schedule is confusing. I want to clean it up so it's not as confusing.
Very good.
I'll go out on a limb and say that
Thank you.
when we have this developed, they'll be able to look and see, am I commercial or am I large commercial? What's the
Right.
difference? So
Right.
they'll be able to see that and understand which one applies to them.
Very good. Great, thank you.
Do you think we'll ever get to the point where the people that use the least get the cheapest rather than the other way around? The people that use the most get the cheapest rates? How about the people that don't? Just, do you think you ever get there?
That's a loaded
I mean, this
question.
thing's been here forever. I mean, I know who did it, so it's hard to get away from it.
Point of history here, the reason we had the complicated was that we adjusted over the years incrementally to certain situations. And when we had a meeting of the Utility Rates Committee, and the head of the EDC said, we never lost the deal because of our rates. Point blank, we never lost the deal because of our rates. What we're saying is we lost them before they came to us because of the complicated measures that it seems to express over the internet or over our deal. And this will be a more satisfactory, astute way to look at it and say, just come on in.
And that's our intent.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next we have our boards and commissions report. Becky?
We have 3 boards and commissions that we're looking for recommendation for the council to add resolutions to the next regular meeting. The first is the Public Safety Tax Oversight Committee. Councilmember Huff is recommending appointment of Bradley Mudd. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
Are there any objections? Okay, we'll add that to the next agenda.
Next, we have the Jackson County Animal Welfare Committee. Mayor Weir has recommended appointing Linda Humphrey. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
Are there any objections? Okay, we'll add that to the next agenda.
And finally, we have the University of Missouri Extension Council. Mayor Weir is recommending appointment of Doug Cowan. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
Are there any objections? Okay, we'll put that on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Did you have something else this evening?
Yeah, since I drank gasoline before I got here. Had another event out there at Independence Center. I'm having a real hard time with that. Anybody else in the city, if there's 3 calls or so, you're considered a nuisance house, nuisance business, all the stuff we seen out at 40 was Kansas City, of course, not us. But we've got that out there, and I'd just like to see that maybe that we put a little heat to the management out there, the owners of that place, to make sure that our citizens are safe out there. We have off-duty retired police that can go out there. I mean, they got guys running around with these white shirts that non-gun carrying and all this stuff's going on. And I just feel like, you know, I'm a very pro Independence Center person. I'm one of the people that like to go out and buy my stuff and put it on and everything, but I just feel like that the management out there, it's not the city's responsibility. We only go out there on a call like any place else, but just wondering if we need to address them and make sure that our citizens are safe out there.
We can certainly reach out to management and have that conversation.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Like to say for sake of everybody, go Chiefs!
Yes. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
We're adjourned.